Thank you, Dr. Abhijit, for giving me this opportunity again. All my co-instructors. So, there is nothing financially to disclosure as far as this presentation is concerned. Dr. Subhankar Sripal has already discussed a lot about the submacular hemorrhage, but it's nothing wrong in recapping that. It's basically the blood which is located in the potential space between the RPE and the neurosensory retina, actually. And it can occur under the RPE also, but when it occurs under the RPE, then managing that hemorrhage becomes difficult, and such cases have got a very bad prognosis. And again, a recap, these are the common causes which can cause the subretinal hemorrhage, but now we come across a lot of PCV cases going in for subretinal hemorrhage very often. And usually that PCV cases will have subretinal as well as vitreous hemorrhage, and the vitreous hemorrhage becomes dehemoglobinized much earlier in case of PCV compared to the rest of the vitreous hemorrhage. And the subretinal hemorrhage also is like a clot. The clot is so bad, like it is sort of a amorphous and calcified clot in these cases. And this can also happen as a complication of surgical procedures, especially like scleral buckling when you're taking a too deeper bite, or when you're draining the subretinal fluid. Or we can have this inadvertent, what you call scleral perforation when you're doing a glaucoma valve surgeries, or when you're doing squint surgeries. And associated sometimes with the melanoma during the radioactive procedures. And when you are hitting the retina hard while doing a barrage or a PRP, you can hear the crackling noise, and that can lead to the choroidal rupture and can lead to subretinal hemorrhage. But usually that can be arrested by giving pressure on the eye using either your thumb or using your contact lens, which is used for doing the laser. And of course, the other causes for the penetrating ocular trauma. But in case of penetrating ocular trauma, it can be associated with suprachoroidal hemorrhage. But in these cases, you don't operate immediately, because wait for at least 10 to 15 days so that the suprachoroidal blood lyses. So when you drain it, it is easy for us to drain. Otherwise, if you take them immediately, the clotted blood is not going to be evacuated from the suprachoroidal space, actually. So usually the submacular PCV has got a better visual acuity at the end compared to the neovascular AMD, because many times the lesions does not involve the fovea, and the progression of the CNVM is also lesser, and the rate of disciform scarring is less rapid in case of PCV compared to the neovascular AMD. Again, this is again we are re-emphasizing. So whenever you come across, you try to intervene in less than 24 hours, because a permanent damage starts happening within 24 hours, and that may be because of the traction damage secondary to the fibrin deposit under the retina, or because of the toxicity of the iron itself, or because of the clot attraction that leads to the shearing stress on the photoreceptors. So whenever you come across a subretinal hemorrhage, go for early intervention. And these are the grades of subretinal hemorrhage. It can be either a small one, or a medium, or large, or a massive, and a hemorrhagic retinal detachment. So when you say it's small, it is up to 4 disc diameters, and if it's more than 4 and not beyond the temporal arcade, you can call it as a medium. And when it goes beyond the temporal vascular arcade, you call it as large or a massive. And subretinal hemorrhagic RDs are quite often seen, and it extends up to the aura, at least in more than 2 quadrants. In these cases, our approach is usually a 2-staged surgery, where you just go do the vitrectomy, inject the PFCL, and wait for a week or so that all the blood comes into the vitreous cavity and the ACN. Then we go for the second surgery. Again, the grade also depends according to thickness, thin or a thick. If it is less than 500 micron, it's called as a thin subretinal hemorrhage, and more than 500 is a thick hemorrhage. And you know very well, thin will carry a better prognosis. So these are the prognosticating factors when you're operating on a patient with subretinal hemorrhage. So if it's a small surface area, it's good. A smaller CFT is better, and better base. I mean, if the patient has got a better visual acuity at the baseline, at diagnosis will have a better visual acuity at 6 months, and the hemorrhages of 2 weeks duration or less is better prognostic eyes. And eye with a good visual acuity prior to the hemorrhage also will behave well after the surgery. The poor factors will be presence of a CNV, presence of neovascular AMD, eyes with relatively thick hemorrhage at the fovea, and the hemorrhage is extending larger than 3 or more disc areas in the greatest linear dimension, or if the hemorrhage is more than 2 weeks duration and poor baseline vision. So when these factors are there, still we'll take them for surgery, but we'll have to give a poor prognosis and the expectation should be reduced prior to the surgery. So the approaches to the submacular hemorrhages are, first one is when we talk about the indication, the patient should have had at least some useful vision prior to the development of subretinal hemorrhage and significantly reduced vitreous hemorrhage. And as I said earlier, the duration should be less than 30 days. And if it is thin, you can manage that with the TPA and what you call the gas, but the thickness should be more than 500 micron. And see to that the RP and the neurosensory retina is healthy before taking them for surgery. If these things are not there, and if you see who are all the patients who are going to not benefit from the surgery, is the patient with poor visual acuity in the affected eye, even before the development of subretinal hemorrhage, or if the thin subretinal hemorrhage is there, or if there is an underlying RP which is atrophic, and if the overlying NSR is also atrophic, you cannot expect good results in these cases. And large subfoveal sub-RP hemorrhage, as we have discussed earlier, is also going to carry a poor prognosis. So the treatment options are, if it is going to be a very thin hemorrhage, you can go for observation. And usually these thin hemorrhages are caused because of the bleeding from the lacquer cracks in case of myopias or POHs or angioid cases. And we can go for vitrectomy with manual removal of the clot, or we can go for TPA, which has already been discussed by Dr. Subankar. So these things I will be skipping because this pneumatic displacement with anti-VEGF and other things have been already discussed. So usually we go for a vitrectomy with clot evacuation. Usually the vitrectomy is same standard 3-port pars plana vitrectomy. And we will go for a large retinotomy. Usually it extends throughout temporal 180 degree, and then you fold the retina over the nasal retina, go under the retina and remove the clot with the forceps or cutter, do a fluid air exchange. After repositioning the retina, then it should be treated like a giant retinal tear. Of course, usually the visual improvement in these cases is limited to only 30 to 50% of the cases. Not all are going to improve. And as associated with any vitrectomy surgery, you will have complications like retinal detachment or PVR changes or cataract or recurrent submacular hemorrhage. And the use of TPA is also advocated, but TPA is useful only if the clot is fresh. If the clot is dehemoglobinized, usually the TPA never acts. So in case of a clotted blood, there is no role for the TPA. And we can go for the gas also. The most important thing is positioning is important, or subretinal air along with TPA can also be used actually. So we will skip all these things because it has already been discussed. This is a case of choroidal rupture following a trauma. We know that there are two types of choroidal rupture, either a direct or an indirect. And this is an indirect choroidal rupture, which usually happens concentric to the disc in the posterior pole. And fortunately, in this case, you can find there is a very thin film of subretinal hemorrhage. Fovea is spared. So we went ahead with the gas injection in this case, and over a period of time, you can see the choroidal tear temporal to the fovea. The patient recovered vision, but still will be having scotoma because of that choroidal. So when we come into our topic per se, the basic rationale for submacular hemorrhage is to remove the subretinal blood and to minimize the further damage to the photoreceptors because of the presence of the blood, and to prevent the rebleed and to replace the RP in case if it is atrophic. So many times you don't need to do that, but if there is any RP atrophy under the retina, I mean macula, you can always go for the what you call RP replacement. So this is one of the cases where you can see, as I have told, it's a massive subretinal bleed, and you can see that it appears more like a subretinal mass lesion. And usually in these cases, a complete vitrectomy is mandatory. You can find that there is a thin film of vitreous which is stuck onto the retina. So unless otherwise we stain that with triamcinolone stent, we are not going to identify. And if we are not going to identify and remove, leave it, there is every chance that PVR change is going to happen. Usually we use 44 gauge needle for raising the raising the bleb of retina. This can be done with automated system. What we usually do is we fill the silicon oil injector with the BSS, and then it is connected to silicon oil injector just under the retina. See to that your plane is perfect. It should not go under the RP. After you raise the bleb in all four quadrants, do a fluid air exchange so that all the the bubbles will coalesce to settle posteriorly, and under the air you can see the periphery better. Go for a 180-degree diathermy, and then you can do retinectomy and fold the retina gently. Usually I use diamond dusted scraper to fold the retina. So once the retina is folded onto the nasal retina, you can see that there is a massive clot. This clot can be removed just by teasing with, you can make out the clot so massive, you can remove it with the forceps. Yes. Many times if it is associated with membrane, the membrane is chewy. Actually, sometimes it's very difficult. We have to remove through anti-segment also. Once this is done, you re-inject the PFCL. You can see how it has to be treated like a, what do you call it?
Mute the buzzer, please.
Like a giant retinal tear. You go for at least 2 or 5 to 10 layers. In this case, we usually go for 2 stage. First, we inject PFCL, fill it with topped up oil, and maybe 5 to 7 days later, when the retina settles very well, you can find now this is the second stage after 5 days. So we are doing additional laser. You can find the retina very well attached. Now you go in for a complete fluid air exchange by removing the PFCL as well as the silicon oil, and you can see the macula. Now fill it with silicon oil. Usually the silicon oil is removed in 3 to 5 months time. This is another case. For want of time, I'll not go in for that. So this is the post of the previous case. You can find that the massive clot has been completely removed, and this is the first POD. Over a period of time, this is another case. Again, we'll skip that for want of time. These are the cases where we have done a submacular surgery. You can find out the temporal 180-degree retinectomy, which appears like a giant retinal tear, and a massive lasers done for a GRT, and there is a slight sparing of the fovea. So most of these cases improve very well. This is another case where we have left some this thing. So this is the previous case where you can find after the removal, there are few clots still remaining, but the foveal contour or the retinal contour to some extent is fine. And in this case, in spite of doing that, we couldn't identify the atrophy of the RP. So if you would have identified on the table, you could have gone in for what you call the RP transplant. So in conclusion, as far as the subretinal hemorrhage is concerned, the natural history is variable and depends largely on the etiology of the submacular hemorrhage. Usually, if they are associated with PCV, the prognosis is good, but in case of CNV, usually it is poor. And that is because of the membrane as well as the atrophy of the RP as well as the hemorrhage. And there is very minimal benefit now compared to observation in case due to CNV, due to DMD, but the advantage of PCV is much better. So it is better to go for early intervention whenever you come across a submacular hemorrhage in case of PCV. And an alternative surgical procedure is in case if there is a macular atrophy, of the RP, you can go for macular translocation or RP grafting under the macular area. Usually the response may be mixed, but usually they do well with this. So with that, I would like to thank Dr. Abhijit for giving me this opportunity. I'm concluding this. Any questions is welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Abhijit. And all the surgeries were performed with our Ingenuity 3D system, which is a 3D vitrectomy operating system. Thank you.